One thing we know about narcissistic relationships is that they bring up a lot of anger, right? We're in them, we're angry, we're frustrated, we can't make sense of it, like this feels really unfair. But then there's something else that happens called bitterness. And people are like, well, is there a difference between bitterness and anger? There is. When it comes to narcissistic healing and healing from these relationships, that matters. So let's take this on. Let's talk about sort of this idea of bitterness versus anger. Now, I recently did a workshop on grief after narcissistic relationships, and I regularly do workshops. Please go to my website and check out the schedule of workshops we have. And a major part of the grief experience, as we all know, is anger. In regular grief, it can be the anger about so many things, but loss does trigger anger. In narcissistic grief, it's something quite different. It's typically a grief about lots of regret, time wasted, false hopes. Anger is an emotion. It's a normal emotion, and an emotion we experience in the face of injustice, of frustration, of unfairness, of betrayal. We often judge anger as an emotion negatively, especially in women. But anger gets a bad brand because of how it is expressed. When angry, we often lash out at other people. We say things that are regrettable. Anger is a normal emotion that can be expressed in unacceptable ways. The trick is to find appropriate outlets for it, be mindful even when the emotion is activated so we do not lash out at others, and then we receive our anger as a sort of sign to maybe give ourselves a second. Anger is sort of a chronic emotional state for people who are in narcissistic relationships because these relationships are so unjust and so uncomfortable and frustrating. Anger in the wake of the grief of a narcissistic relationship or grief about a narcissistic relationship is also normal. So then that begs the question, what is bitterness? Bitterness is the unhealthy part of the anger that consumes us from the inside out. Bitterness is the rumination, the obsession with revenge and vindictiveness. It is, as Nelson Mandela put it, like drinking poison ourselves and expecting our enemy to die. Bitterness means you are still in it. You are still wishing ill will on someone, that your mind is still in it. You feel like you cannot rest or relax or feel at peace until the narcissist gets punished somehow. And so you sit and you stew and you wait and you almost feel sick from the waiting. And it could feel even worse when the narcissistic people in your life just keep living their lives and nothing bad happens. That's bitterness. It's different than anger. Bitterness is obsessive. It tends to be focused more on the unhealthy spectrum. It's not at all focused on your growth. Bitterness is often sort of more focused on the harm that you're kind of hoping to another and the faulty premise that if something bad happens to them, like their next person breaks up with them, that you'll feel better. Yeah, probably you won't. You might get a jolly moment of schadenfreude if their new partner breaks up with them, but then you still have not processed your own grief. Many people confuse and conflate bitterness and anger, and it's incorrect. They're actually quite different. Anger can really very much actually be part of a healthy process of grief, of letting go, of normal emotional expression. Bitterness is about holding on. When you are bitter, you are still in the relationship because you are giving up most of your mental real estate to the bitterness. Bitterness is an awful part of the narcissistic relationship process, especially the letting go part. It is particularly pronounced in situations such as when the narcissist cheats on you and moves on into their shiny new future. And your bitterness may mean that you focus obsessively on your narcissistic ex-partner's new life, or you remain focused on the toxic behavior of a parent, or you relentlessly and endlessly attempt to pursue some kind of justice seeking against any narcissist in your life, a colleague, a boss, a friend, a parent. Anger is recognizing that the narcissistic experience sucked. It's uncomfortable, but it's about gathering yourself and getting out. Bitterness is remaining stuck in the situation and plotting. Now, narcissistic relationships are so damn confusing that it's easy to become bitter. I completely empathize with the bitterness. But you have wasted so much time in this relationship. You have been verbally and emotionally abused. You've been invalidated, devalued, gaslighted, raged at, minimized, lied to, and perhaps even betrayed. You've already done a long sentence. Bitterness extends that sentence. In fact, my goal for this YouTube channel and all the work I do through seminars and writing and all of that is to shed some light and understanding on all of this. I recognize that it is actually quite unsatisfying once you actually understand how a narcissistic mind works. But you do learn in all of this that it's not you, it really is them. We all make mistakes. I've been played, you've been played. Frankly, with very rare exceptions, everyone I know has been played by a narcissist, even the narcissists themselves. So you are in very good company. In fact, your company is everyone in the world. So be angry, punch a punching bag, scream at the moon, break something safely. I once, pretty recently, I was very angry, something narcissistic, and I took my anger out on a Kleenex box, which was an interesting choice. I took this Kleenex box and I threw it against the ground over and over. I was crying the whole time until there was just pieces of box and Kleenex everywhere. Nobody got hurt. I did it outside. Nobody even saw it. But that day I released something. There was a lot of messy Kleenex around. I had to clean it up, but my God, I felt better. But know the difference. Do not confuse bitterness and anger. Bitterness can mean a lifetime lost. You deserve to move forward. The narcissist is the one who lost. You didn't. You eliminated a stressor from your life. And yes, I recognize that it is far more complicated, as you may also be grieving family, love, hope, and your own life history. But as Rumi writes, where there is ruin, there is hope of a treasure. Instead of sifting through the ruin, go find that treasure in that mess. Listen, some bitterness after a narcissistic relationship is normal, but recognize that rumination about revenge is not healthy, and it really does mean that the narcissist has won. Having your anger and letting it flow, and then taking back your life with your grace and your head held high, honestly, if you are looking for revenge, that is the best kind. A life well lived without the narcissist. That's some revenge I can get behind. Go out there, be your authentic self. And that, to me, people being authentic is successful. And once you get that, revenge isn't something that it has to be a performance for the narcissistic person in your life. Revenge is you living that life and getting to that beautiful place I want all of you to get to where your narcissist is concerned, which is that place of relative indifference. So there's a difference between bitterness and anger. Anger means you're walking away from it. Bitterness is sort of the equivalent of sitting in your dirty bathwater. You're still stuck in it. Rumination is when we just keep almost obsessively dwelling on something over and over and over again. We can't stop thinking about it. We'll be sitting there sort of staring off in the distance. I can't believe he said that. I wish I had said that. I can't believe this happened. When did that happen? Let me go back and think about that. What date did that happen on? And you're on, what if I had tried this? What if we had done that? When did things change? Why wasn't it like that? What about the love bombing? We went to Miami. We had so much fun. And you just can't let go of it. So much so that there might be times people are looking at you and they're sort of waving their hand in front of your face. And in fact, it would be interesting to see, have any of you found this to be your pattern? That, please drop us a comment here. Like, has rumination and obsession after a narcissistic relationship been something that really got stuck in your head? So you might be thinking, hey, any relationship, don't you always ruminate about it? Well, think about it. Have you ever had a healthy breakup? Let's say you were in a romantic relationship with somebody and you date 6 months, a year, maybe even longer. And you guys decide this isn't working. It's just, you're going in different directions. Maybe one of you is moving. Maybe somebody's working a lot of hours. But it was a really good relationship. It's just that you can't give it the time. And you respectfully agree to let it go. You may have a moment where you're like, I hope that wasn't a mistake, but you recognize that you might have been holding each other back. Like you realize that maybe this move for a new job or school is important. Or you recognize that, yeah, this person's time, the way their time was cut up, I was getting more and more resentful over time. The healthier the relationship, often the less the rumination when it ends. So what is it about these narcissistic relationships that lead us to ruminate about them on and on and on after they're done? Well, there's a few things. Number one, they confuse us. The gaslighting, the second guessing, the leaving us feeling like we're not enough, we're confused. I have seen people who are incredibly well put together, confident people get into narcissistic relationships, and then when they were in it and when they were out of it, they were like a different person. They no longer believed in themselves. They were always confused, like, did I really say that? Or maybe I'm wrong. Lots of anxiety, lots of uncertainty. Because these relationships confuse us so much, we're actually ruminating while we're in them. The rumination's not new. It's like, I don't understand, like, what's going on? I'm so confused. And the person will just be saying, is there something else I should be trying? Is there something I should be doing? Is there something I should be saying? And that is happening in the relationship, so you can be darn sure it's going to happen when the relationship is done. People will report this most often in romantic relationships, but they'll also often report it in family relationships too. Like, did my mother really say that? I can't be in touch with her anymore. My mom really did that. My mom really said that. And they'll just go through it over and over and over again. There are some psychologists that argue that rumination is an essential part of processing information. We often ruminate things so we can let them go, and that's actually a lot of what happens in therapy. Cynical people might call it navel gazing. I call it essential. Sometimes what happens is people have to sort of play it out over and over and over again in therapy, and one day they're done. It's like throwing up something that made you sick. You kind of have to throw up for a while, like, yeah, I'm pretty weak, but this is out of me. And a good therapist will receive that. They'll never judge that and say, like, could we move a little quicker? You talked about this last week too. That we receive it with respect and with an open heart. Now, are your friends going to do that? Maybe not. But rumination does serve a function. The struggle with narcissistic relationships is that the rumination just goes on too long. You'll find yourself continuing to ruminate about this relationship, sometimes months or even years down the road. And the problem with rumination is it blocks you from being able to enter into new experiences, new relationships, and it may even distract you from other very important things that you have to do, such as work or taking care of your family or other people in your life that you want to be with and be present with. Another reason that narcissistic relationships do result in so much rumination is the gaslighting. If a person's never experienced gaslighting before, they don't know what it is. And once it starts happening, sadly for most of us, our knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, maybe I did get it wrong. Maybe I didn't say that. It's our first thing many of us do. We take responsibility. Healthy people take responsibility. And narcissists are banking on that. Because if you take responsibility, they don't have to. And then they realize gaslighting can be a useful tool. It's not always that active. Sometimes they gaslight because it's just what they do. It's not that it's not like it's well intended, but it's almost an unconscious process because they're always trying to protect themselves, right? But all that gaslighting means that we'll often mutter to ourselves, did I really say that? Did I really do that? It links to the confusion. The more gaslighting that happens in a relationship, the more that we ruminate about it when it's finished. Especially when there are significant breaches of trust. And that's sort of the third reason that that narcissistic relationships, when they're done, leave us with so much rumination. It's the lying and things like potentially cheating and other breaches of trust. Narcissists often do lie. They lie because it protects them. Lying in tiny doses, maybe we can get past. They might lie about why they were late. They might lie about a deadline. But when they're lying about big ticket stuff, like their job, or maybe not being divorced, or about having a child, it can really, really confuse you. Because by now you may really like this person. And then they may drop a big ticket lie on you. and you're saying, oh my gosh, I have feelings for this person. Some people might say, to heck with that, you lied to me, I'm out of here. But for a lot of people, they start struggling, saying, well, I love these things and it's so hard to meet people and I don't want to be alone. And well, maybe they were anxious and they thought I'd reject them if they told me the truth. And before you know it, you're doing all the rationalizing and heavy lifting for them. Lying is like breadcrumbs, where they're just a trail, right? And lying begets more lying. Once a person realizes it works, they're going to keep doing it, especially if they've gained your trust through the love-bombing process. In addition, we know that narcissists have a higher likelihood of cheating in a relationship, and if not full on having sex with someone else, micro-cheating stuff, inappropriate stuff on social media, inappropriate texting, feeling the need to just sort of keep everyone they've ever dated on the chain and sort of giving them a tiny little bit of promise there. There's an inappropriateness that narcissists sort of stay in relationally. And when your trust has been breached in that way, it also can do a number on you and leave you ruminating and wondering. And that loss of trust can trail you into all of your future relationships. It can take a really long time to establish trust again after it's been breached so many times. Rumination is also more likely in some people. Some people are at greater risk for rumination than other people. The people at the highest risk of rumination are people who have histories of anxiety, people who might have more neurotic personality styles where they're just prone to worrying. People who are sort of natural worriers are more likely to worry, so they're also more likely to ruminate. People who have a history of depression are often more likely to ruminate, and other anxiety disorders, obviously things like obsessive compulsive disorder or any sort of obsessional type of thinking style. Those people are also more likely to be vulnerable, not only to narcissists sometimes, but then also to the rumination afterwards. I've had many people say, when does this end? When do I stop thinking about this? Depends on the person. Sometimes it only lasts for a few months, and sometimes it can last for years, which can be really difficult because it can really pull you out of life. Because of all that confusion, the rumination can stay in place, which means it becomes critical, whether through therapy, whether through support groups, whether through online content or reading about it, to recognize what these patterns were about. And it wasn't a deficit in you. You did not get abused by a narcissist because there's something wrong with you. You didn't know. Most cases, people just didn't know. And then, oftentimes, because these are intergenerational cycles, they may have had a narcissistic parent and feeling like they're not good enough or having to prove themselves in a relationship. That's all you know. So you do it again. All of that, though, sets you up for a greater likelihood of wondering, maybe this was me. And a lot of the rumination is, how did I let this happen? Maybe this is me. Maybe I'm not good enough. What if they go on? What if they go on to a bigger, brighter, better future, and all of that? Working with someone either clinically or exploring this and understanding it can be a really, really important step to recognizing that the ruminating is normal, you're not going crazy, and you're not losing your mind, and you're not losing your marbles, or all the terrible things that people think about themselves. But in fact, you're trying to process something that doesn't make sense. And by understanding that ruminating is a normal part of this process, then you're often able, over time, to realize that this is a normal part of the process and there's not anything wrong with me. And that the confusion and the gaslighting and just understanding what a narcissistic relationship does to us can be enough to help you let it go. Information and knowledge are power when it comes to being able to deal with the challenges of narcissistic abuse. Rumination is normal for a short time, but it pulls you out of your life if it lasts too long. If it's lasting for a very long time, more than 6 to 9 months, if you can, try to seek out help, or at least as much information as you can to help you recognize why a narcissistic relationship did such a number on you and how to recover. I'm going to take on something that a lot of survivors do to themselves. And drop in the comments if this is something you've ever done to yourself. Have you ever said to yourself, oh, I allowed this to happen? When you're thinking about your narcissistic relationship, you may look at a mess or an argument and say, yeah, this is my fault. I let all of this happen. Let's talk a little bit about that shame that people feel when they believe that the whole mess that's been created by a narcissistic relationship is something that you allowed to happen. So many survivors look at the wreckage of any kind of narcissistic relationship, especially if the relationship has gone on for a long time. And beyond just the head shaking, the sadness, the anxiety, the anger, the rumination, the helplessness, there's often another sentiment that I allowed this to happen, right? When survivors tell me this, and many, many do, I do look sideways at them and say, come on again, you allowed what to happen? They will reiterate, I allowed this to happen. I allowed this mess to grow and hurt other people because I stayed, because I tried to fix it, because I believed that they would change, because I chose them in the first place, right? That's what they believe. So in essence, when a person says that I allowed this to happen, they are saying that I am responsible for this mess because I actually tried to make this relationship work, because I gave this person a second chance, because I forgave them, because I believed that they could change. Then the survivor goes a bridge too far, and in essence, by saying, I allowed this to happen, is basically taking responsibility for another person's toxic behavior, which is what most survivors within narcissistic relationships do. I have witnessed people do this in long-term committed relationships and marriages. I have witnessed people do this with family members. I have witnessed people do this in workplaces. They look at the mess and they believe, it's me. I'm the one who allowed this to happen. I do not know what magical spell that people with antagonistic personalities cast upon most of us, that we are willing to look at the damage created by them and say that we allowed it to happen. In essence, taking on the complicity and blame for a mess that was originally generated by their dysregulation, their lack of empathy, their blame shifting. The story of an antagonistic or a narcissistic relationship is much easier to tell backwards than forwards. While people are in it, and especially before they understand what narcissism is and how it works in relationships, typically they follow the party line. Try harder, communicate harder, forgive, take responsibility, hope they can change yourself instead, right? One day you read something or watch something or listen to something and learn that, wait a minute, this thing I'm in, this doesn't really change. There isn't much that you can do about it. And once all the things that our narcissism is, once those soak in, you recognize that for years you were driving down the wrong road. You didn't allow anything to happen. In most cases, many people in these relationships actually treat the person with this kind of personality style as you would a person with a kinder, healthier, nicer personality style. You thought they were having a bad day. You didn't allow anything to happen. You treated them with an expectation of goodness, with compassion, the same compassion you would grant to other people. When we talk to ourselves this way and say things like, I allowed this to happen, I'm to blame in part for this, what we've done is we've internalized their gaslighting. We've also internalized that sentiment that other people have, that wonder why we couldn't make it work. You didn't allow anything to happen. They did what they do. And they did it to your detriment. You were simply in the splash zone of their cruel behavior. It's important you don't keep falling in the I allowed this to happen kind of language, because that kind of language starts to bleed into other areas of your lives. We become our own abusers. We blame ourselves for the abuse we receive from others. We blame ourselves from the abuse that the antagonistic people in our lives propel onto others. I know it is painful when children are involved and you feel responsible for having children with a toxic person and ending them up with a difficult parent. But you didn't allow it to happen. In most cases, you didn't know, or at least you didn't know until you were well into the relationship. All the time wasted in high school and college on classes we will never use, Imagine if there was one on red flags and manipulation. That should have been a required class. We're just not taught any of this. It's absolutely crucial for survivors to find kinder ways to talk to yourselves. It is an essential part of healing. And no, you didn't allow this to happen. Allowing something to happen implies you gave it permission. At no point did you actually consent and sign up for somebody to do this much harm to you. It happened, and if nothing else, your nervous system was so transfixed by the mess that was unfolding around you. It wasn't about allowing. It was about what happens when a person's behavior, and this is the case with most narcissistic folks, never has consequences. If there is a universal experience that people who are experiencing narcissistic abuse or who are survivors of narcissistic abuse all share, it is the experience of regret. What are the regrets that people talk about? They'll say that I regret that this relationship ever happened. I regret that I spent so much time in it. I regret that somehow this relationship wasn't different. I saw such potential. I regret at the opportunities I lost because of being in this relationship. I regret what being in this relationship did to my family. I regret not getting out of this relationship sooner. Believe it or not, there's people who regret that it ended. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And actually, I'd love for any of you to share some of the regrets you've had in your narcissistic relationship. Drop them in the comments. Would love to hear them. Now, regret is a sense of sadness or disappointment over something that has occurred, and particularly over any kind of a lost opportunity or just lost moment. You can easily see how regret and rumination are best friends. Regret gives rumination its material. A hefty chunk of what people ruminate about is, ding, regret. In an intimate or close relationship is where we see regret is often the most pronounced. It's most often because you are the person who chose this person. In many cases, people regret the day that they met this person. They regret not seeing the red flags earlier and listening to them. They may regret moving too fast, falling for the red flags early on, and falling for the hoovering down the pike. Then you may get caught in the regret abyss. You're not sure whether you're willing to leave because you have fear about regretting that you left. And then you're not sure whether you should stay, but then you have potential regret about the time you may waste if you stay. Can't win. Many people I have worked with over the years have indicated that they regret that they didn't honor the red flags that they saw in the first few months. And they kick themselves for years or even a lifetime about that. Now, interestingly, some people regret leaving and take the stance of perhaps the devil you know is better than the devil you know don't, and it's preferable. And they ruminate and wonder about whether the next person will get a better version of the narcissist. By the way, there is no better version of them. This is it. This is as good as it gets. Or they'll wonder if maybe the next person will be enough for the narcissist. And remember, nobody and nothing is ever enough for the narcissist. There may be regrets about time that you lost with children if you leave, family relationships that would be ruined if you leave the narcissistic relationship, and the regrets from leaving a narcissistic relationship can really be quite paralyzing for some people. So you can see here how regret is such a universal part of narcissistic abuse. Now, if you are from a narcissistic family, regret is a baseline that thrums throughout your life. When you come from a narcissistic family, let's face it, you missed out. You missed out on important social, emotional development that arises out of healthy mirroring, unconditional love and validation. You missed out on those things. You missed out on stretching your wings because you felt safe enough to do so, and you felt as though you were enough rather than feeling like not enough. You missed out on the nudge of encouragement you needed to pursue your dreams. You missed out on the support you needed just to figure stuff out. That's a lot of stuff to regret. And there's a risk for those from narcissistic families that they can live in this morass of regret for a very long time. And then there's a greater risk of falling into a pattern of victimhood, which can hold you back. But it's understandable when opportunities had to occur, that those opportunities, like mirroring, had to occur during a certain developmental window and they didn't happen. Regret is an almost sensible reaction to that. There's no going back. And in the workplace, a narcissistic boss or a narcissistic mentor can easily derail your career. Your ideas might get stolen or ignored. You may not fluff the boss enough and then get replaced by the narcissist sycophants and minions. Anyone who thinks they can survive and or thrive under a narcissistic boss is woefully wrong. And many, many years can be wasted in a job waiting for the narcissistic boss to either advance you, or perhaps you're waiting for the narcissistic boss to be replaced. The fact is, a narcissist is far more likely to outlast you in a workplace. And the regret over years wasted in a job where you have no chance of being noticed, working under conditions of chaos and undermining, can fill you with bottomless regret. So what do you do? Well, how do you deal with this part of narcissistic abuse, of regret? Regret is like a psychological cancer that can get in you and spread, and not only fuel rumination, but make you prone, again, to this sense of victimhood and turn you into your own worst enemy. It is such a classical part of narcissistic abuse, and it needs to be addressed systematically. So what are some things you can do? First, remember, above all else, acceptance really matters. This narcissistic abuse is a hand that was dealt to you, especially in an involuntary relationship like family. You didn't choose them. But here's the deal. And as abusive and invalidating and painful as this narcissistic relationship was, and wishing it was different or regretting it happened, those patterns burn important emotional resources you need to be able to make a better fight for yourself. Secondly, after you get through acceptance, you need to focus on meaning and purpose. You need to find a way to integrate this difficult story and find the meaning and purpose. It can be profoundly powerful. And instead of regret, you may then find a strength in pushing back on narcissistic abuse. That goes back to the idea I keep saying over and over on these videos, that surviving narcissistic abuse is a superpower. That's because it is. Regret can be spun into something bigger and better once you can extract some kind of meaning from this experience. Third, you got to recognize that some days are going to be much harder than others. Even if after you've healed from narcissistic abuse, ongoing experiences in your life can be quite activating and triggering, and they can once again flood you with that sense of regret. You can't control those experiences. It's okay. It will pass. Sometimes people feel that if they are hearing about people who had healthy family systems, or whose marriages are working, or careers are succeeding, while theirs have been harmed by narcissistic abuse, you can feel that regret come up again. Please be gentle with yourself. It's okay to be with the negative feeling. It'll pass. Fourth, please be careful that you don't fall into a vortex of victimhood. It's so easy to do. You've been through a lot if you've endured narcissistic abuse, and it's very easy to go from regret to why did this happen to me? Then you start going to why does everything bad happen to me? Catch yourself before that happens. A victimized identity can hold you back, and you need to be your best advocate. Yeah, something bad did happen to you, and now is the time to learn from it and pay attention to red flags and not enable the narcissist and all of that stuff. But you also need to take a minute to pay attention to any of the good stuff that's happening in your life. That stuff can be an antidote to regret. Fifth, therapy. And I'm going to be saying this throughout this series, but yeah, you need a place to lay out all the regret and purge it, and then slowly release it. Therapy is that place for many people. And other people may find spiritual outlets as well as daily practices such as meditation. Others of you may find that therapy is not accessible for you. You might find, for example, online support spaces, Facebook groups for survivors of narcissistic abuse. Those may also give you communities where you can see people do share their regret. Narcissistic relationships waste time. They waste a lot of time. Years, decades, and sadly in some cases, lifetimes. Some people may lift their head and say, you know what, I'm 70 years old. I gave up my life to this. What am I supposed to do now? And get very angry. You know what? 70 is late in the game. I'll give you that. However, that narcissistic abuse has already done so much harm. Please don't give the rest of your time to that. It is such a common pattern in narcissistic abuse, and of all the patterns, it's one that really makes sense. Pushing back on the regret in terms of survival from narcissistic abuse is a gift you can give yourself. Please find a way to get there. And again, I would love to hear from any of you some of your regrets from being in a narcissistic relationship. These comments then become another tool for all of us to get support and share your experiences so all of you can see that you're not alone. Just drop that in the comments, do it anonymously, change your name on YouTube if you need to so you can share some of this. But hearing some of these things really fortify my ability even to talk about these issues, and certainly everyone else is going to grow from it too. When a human relationship ends, whether because someone dies, because people split up, or people make a decision to kind of leave a job or anything, there is always going to be a period of grief. Grief is a normal human reaction to loss. Now, some people are really surprised when this happens after a narcissistic relationship ends. They're thinking, I should be the happiest person in the world. I should be relieved. And most people who leave relationships with narcissists, and in fact, when I was doing the interviews for both of my books, that was the prevailing theme. I am so relieved. I can say what I want. I don't have to worry about being criticized. I can actually spend time with people I want. The list went on. So relief was a really prevailing emotion. But what would confuse people is that they would also feel the traditional patterns of grief. They would feel a sense of loss. They would miss the person. They would go through all the stages of grief, like a denial and bargaining and anger and all of that. And then say, if I'm grieving this person, maybe the relationship shouldn't be done. Maybe there was actually something there. And they'll start almost gaslighting themselves and getting confused. Keep in mind that regardless of why or how a relationship ends, it is normal to grieve a relationship. It's what human beings do. When a relationship is complicated, like a relationship with a narcissist, the grief can feel even more complicated. You may actually miss parts of the person. And in fact, that's one of the toughest things about relationships with narcissists. Not every moment, not every day is terrible. In fact, many people will say, the reason I'm having difficulty ending the relationship, or I'm having difficulty now that the relationship ended, was that there were just enough good days to keep me in the game. And there are. Think back to the love bombing days even. How good it was when it was good. And a lot of times we know that narcissists have their own weird virtues. They're really smart. They're really confident. They know how to have a good time. Those are obviously things any of us would miss. Anyone who's ever been in a relationship with a narcissist will say, there was something really compelling about that person. Sometimes the thing that you miss from being in a relationship with a narcissist was that there was always something to do. You were always having to do something to please them, or win them over, or validate them, or be better, or make your hair better, or lose weight, or it was always something to do. Now that they're gone, you're like, oh, I might just let myself go because I no longer have to impress this person. So there's a lot of things that go away, good and bad, when a relationship with a narcissist ends. On many days, when you break off a narcissistic relationship, your day can be a really complicated hodgepodge of both grief and relief. People will report waking up saying, what have I done? I don't know what I'm going to do without this person. But later in the day, might report feeling like they're light as air, that they feel like they could fly, that they're so relieved at this being done. And that confusion of sometimes feeling relieved and sometimes feeling confused, especially after years of being emotionally manipulated by a narcissist, can sometimes leave people wondering, maybe I did the wrong thing. Because remember, one of the biggest, saddest legacies of narcissistic abuse is self-doubt, questioning yourself, wondering, did I do the right thing? Did I say the right thing? Maybe I didn't do the right thing. And when you come out of a relationship with a narcissist, the self-doubt sticks around for a while, like an echo. And because of that self-doubt, if you do have a moment of grief, of questioning yourself, or wondering, did I do the right thing? It can be really, really destabilizing. And many people will wonder, maybe I need to go back in. Maybe I didn't do the right thing. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe they're not a narcissist. And that's the beauty of narcissism. It doesn't really change.